January 22, 1943. West of Point Cruz, Guadalcanal. 9:17 in the morning. Second Lieutenant John George is crouched in the broken concrete and rotting timber of a Japanese bunker that no longer belongs to its builders. The air is heavy, wet, and alive. Insects buzz. Birds cry somewhere above the canopy. The jungle never goes quiet here, it only waits. George is 27 years old. He is lean, sunburned, streaked with sweat and dried mud. His helmet is pulled low, his body pressed tight to the earth. In his hands is a rifle his fellow officers have mocked for 6 weeks. A Winchester Model 70. Bolt action. 5 rounds. Civilian sporting rifle. Fitted with a Lyman Alaskan scope that offers just 2.5 power magnification. It looks out of place here, surrounded by mud, sandbags, and shattered concrete. Every other man in the 132nd Infantry Regiment carries an M1 Garand, semi-automatic, 8 rounds, standard issue. George's rifle is none of those things. Captain Morris once called it a toy. Other platoon leaders had nicknamed it his mail-order sweetheart. When George unpacked it back at Camp Forest, Tennessee, the armorer had asked if he planned to hunt deer or Germans. George answered calmly, Japanese. No one laughed harder than the officers. Now George is staring through that laughed-at scope at a banyan tree 240 yards away. The tree is massive, nearly 90 feet tall, its trunk thick enough that 3 men couldn't encircle it. Its branches spread like grasping arms, woven with vines, leaves, and shadow. Somewhere up there, a Japanese sniper may already be watching him. The Japanese have 11 snipers operating in the Point Cruz groves. In the last 72 hours, those men have killed 14 Americans. Not in firefights, not in assaults. They killed men filling canteens, men on patrol, men walking trails they thought were safe. One man was shot through the neck from a tree his unit had passed twice. Malaria is killing fewer men than the snipers. That is why George is here. 6 weeks earlier, when the 132nd Infantry shipped out, George's rifle wasn't with him. It sat in a warehouse in Illinois while he crossed the Pacific watching other men clean their Garands on deck. He had saved 2 years of National Guard pay to buy it. He requested it be forwarded through military mail. 6 weeks later, in late December 1942, a supplies sergeant handed him a wooden crate marked fragile. Inside was the rifle, 9 pounds unloaded. The scope added another 12 ounces. It was heavier than the Garand and slower. Bolt action meant every shot required discipline, patience, and time. Captain Morris ordered George to leave it in his tent and carry a real weapon. George carried it anyway. The 132nd had relieved the Marines on Guadalcanal just after Christmas. The Marines had taken Henderson Field and held it, but they had not cleared the jungle west of the Matanica River. Mount Austin still loomed inland, fortified with bunkers and defended by 500 Japanese soldiers. George's battalion attacked on December 17th. 16 days of fighting followed. 34 Americans killed. 279 wounded. Jungle assaults against bunkers built into rock and earth. By January 2nd, they finally took the western slope. Through all of it, George fired his Winchester 0 times. Now the fighting is different. No bunkers. No fixed lines. Just jungle and trees, and men hidden inside them. George has no spotter. No radio. Just his rifle, a canteen, and 60 rounds of .30-06 ammunition packed on stripper clips. The same cartridge fired by the Garand. Hunting ammunition he brought from Tennessee, cleaned, and checked again last night. He spent hours cleaning the cosmoline from the rifle, checking the Griffin and Helmut, testing the trigger, glass smooth, just over 3 pounds. He had tuned it himself years earlier at Camp Perry. The battalion commander summoned him last night and asked one question. Could that rifle hit anything? George told him about the Illinois State Championship, about winning at age 23, about 6-inch groups at 600 yards with iron sights, about putting 5 rounds inside 4 inches at 300 yards. The commander gave him until morning to prove it. Now it is morning. George moves the scope slowly, left to right, top to bottom. He ignores the noise. He watches for movement. That is the rule in jungle sniper work. Not shapes, not colors, Movement. At 9:17, he sees it. A branch shifts. There is no wind. The movement is slight, almost imperceptible. 87 feet up, a darker shape nestled where 3 branches meet. A man, facing east, watching the supply trail. George exhales. He adjusts 2 clicks right for wind, settles the crosshairs, controls his breathing. This is no longer target shooting. This is a man trained to kill him first. George squeezes the trigger. The Winchester cracks. 240 yards away, the Japanese sniper jerks, loses his grip, and falls. His body crashes through branches and vines before hitting the jungle floor near the base of the tree. George works the bolt without lifting his cheek from the stock. The empty cartridge spins away. A fresh round slides into the chamber. He keeps the scope on the tree. Because Japanese snipers never work alone. 2 shots become a pattern. The body at the base of the banyan tree lies still, partially hidden by roots and fallen leaves. George does not look at it again. Dead men do not matter. Living ones do. Japanese snipers work in pairs. 1 shooter, 1 spotter. If George has just killed the shooter, the spotter is nearby, either in the same tree or watching from another, already searching for the source of the shot. George keeps his scope steady. He does not rush. He does not celebrate. He breathes. Minutes pass. At 9:43, movement catches his eye 60 yards north of the first tree. Another banyan. Lower this time, perhaps 50 feet up. The shape is sliding down the trunk, careful, controlled. The spotter has heard the shot and is abandoning the position before artillery or infantry responds. George tracks the movement, leads it slightly. The crosshairs settle. He fires. The second sniper falls backward, his Arisaka rifle clattering through branches ahead of him. 2 shots. 2 bodies on the jungle floor. George reloads from a stripper clip. His hands are steady. His breathing slow. This feels familiar, like Camp Perry, except the targets fall and do not rise again. At 11:21, the war answers back. A Japanese bullet slams into the sandbags 6 inches from George's head. Dirt and debris spray his face. The crack of the shot echoes through the trees. George rolls left instantly, pressing into the bunker wall. That shot came from the southwest. A different direction. A different shooter. He waits. 3 minutes pass. Then 5. He eases back to his firing position and begins glassing the trees to the southwest. The shooter should have relocated after firing, but relocation in this jungle is limited. Banyan trees are not plentiful. Good hides even less so. At 11:38, George finds him. 3rd tree from the left in a cluster of 5. 73 feet up. The sniper has shifted branches but stayed in the same tree. A mistake. George settles the crosshairs and fires. The 3rd sniper falls silently. By noon, George has killed 5 Japanese snipers. Word spreads through the battalion quickly. Men who mocked his rifle now whisper his name. A few ask if they can watch. George refuses. Spectators draw attention. Attention draws fire. The Japanese adapt. After the 5th kill, the trees go still. No movement. No shots. George spends the afternoon glassing leaves and shadows that never resolve into men. At 1600 hours, he returns to battalion headquarters. Captain Morris is waiting. The mockery is gone from his voice. He wants George back in position at dawn. January 23rd begins with rain. Heavy tropical rain that turns the jungle floor into mud and erases visibility beyond 100 yards. George sits in the bunker and waits. Rain masks sound. It masks movement. If the Japanese are smart, they will climb during this weather. At 8:15, the rain stops. By 8:45, visibility is just good enough. At 9:12, George spots the first sniper of the day. The Japanese soldier has climbed during the rain. He is positioned farther out, 290 yards. Longer range. Smarter placement. George compensates and fires. The 6th sniper falls. At 9:57, Japanese mortars begin falling around the bunker. The first rounds land 40 yards short. The second salvo 20 yards. George does not wait for the third. He grabs his rifle and runs. He sprints north along the tree line and dives into a shell crater just as the third salvo obliterates the bunker in explosions and flying debris. The position he occupied seconds earlier disappears. George relocates again, 120 yards north, behind a fallen tree. From here, he has cover and a clear view of the groves. The hunt has changed. The Japanese are no longer reacting. They are actively searching for him. At 14:23, George kills the 7th sniper. At 15:41, the 8th. This one is high, 94 feet up. Good concealment. But the sun angle betrays him, turning the silhouette dark against the sky. At 1700 hours, Captain Morris sends a runner. George has been in position 9 hours. 8 confirmed kills. 12 rounds fired. For misses. That night, George cleans his Winchester again. He thinks about numbers. 11 Japanese snipers total. 8 are dead. 3 remain. The best ones. The ones who have watched everything. January 24th begins before dawn with rain. George moves early, choosing a new position, a cluster of rocks once used by Marines as a machine gun nest. Elevated. Overlapping fields of fire. Unexpected. At 8:17, he finds sniper number 9. Palm tree. 190 yards. Low. Only 40 feet up. Too obvious. George hesitates. The remaining snipers would not make simple mistakes. This feels like bait. He scans wider. Slower. 11 minutes pass. At 8:28, he finds the real threat, 91 feet up in a banyan tree northwest of the palm. Perfect hide. Watching George's old position, George uses the bait. He shoots the palm tree sniper first. As expected, movement erupts in the banyan. George swings, fires again. 2 shots. 2 more bodies fall. 10 dead. George runs. Machine gun fire rakes the rocks 6 seconds after he leaves them. He relocates again, settling into a water-filled crater, chest deep, rifle resting on the rim. 1 sniper remains. And this one is learning. The last sniper learns. The jungle feels different now. Not quieter, never quieter, but tighter. As if the trees themselves are watching. George sits motionless in the water-filled crater, mud soaking into his uniform, insects crawling across his neck and helmet. The Winchester rests across the crater rim, barrel angled just high enough to stay dry. 10 Japanese snipers are dead. The 11th is still alive. And he has had 3 days to study how George thinks. George scans the tree line through the Lyman Alaskan. 2.5 power magnification turns distant shadows into defined shapes, but offers no mercy. Every knot of bark, every vine, every dark patch could be a man. George examines each one slowly, methodically, refusing to rush. At 9:47, he understands his mistake. The last sniper is not in the trees. Movement flickers at the edge of his peripheral vision, low and deliberate, 60 yards south. Something crawling through ferns and fallen branches. Not climbing. Not waiting. Advancing. The Japanese sniper is on the ground. George freezes. He keeps his eyes in the scope, but widens his awareness. The crater rim blocks his shot. To fire, he would have to rise, and rising would expose him. The sniper stops at 9:52, 40 yards from the rocks where George had been earlier. He studies the position carefully. George watches him through gaps in vegetation. The man is patient, experienced. This is no reckless soldier. At 9:58, the sniper moves again. 30 yards. 25. Working along George's previous escape route, tracking him like prey. He reaches the machine gun nest at 10:03 and settles in, facing east, watching the drainage ditch where George should be hiding. The sniper is now 38 yards from George's actual position. His back is exposed. It would be an easy shot. Center mass. No scope required. George does not fire. Men who survive this long do not expose themselves without reason. George scans wider, slower. If this is bait, someone is covering it. At 10:06, George finds him. 70 yards northwest of the rocks, behind a fallen tree trunk. Another Japanese soldier. Rifle aimed at the drainage ditch. Not moving. Watching. 2 men. The final snipers are working together. George lowers himself deeper into the water until only his eyes and the top of his helmet remain visible. He keeps the Winchester vertical, barrel clear. He waits. At 10:13, the soldier in the rocks stands. He has seen nothing. He signals to his partner. Both begin moving east, parallel, 70 yards apart, executing a sweep. They pass George's crater. Their backs are exposed. George rises slowly, water streaming from his uniform. He brings the Winchester to his shoulder. The first shot drops the man who had been in the rocks. George works the bolt and fires again. The second sniper falls mid-turn, his rifle slipping from his hands. 11 snipers. All dead. George does not celebrate. He hears voices. Japanese voices. Multiple men moving toward the fallen bodies. Infantry, not snipers. A patrol sent to recover the dead. George drops back into the crater and submerges again. The voices grow louder. Branches snap. Equipment rattles. They find the bodies. Then they find the tracks. Boot prints in the mud leading from the rocks to the crater. At 10:31, a Japanese soldier appears at the crater rim, looking straight down. Their eyes meet. George fires from the water. The man falls backward. George cycles the bolt, rises, fires twice more. 2 more soldiers collapse. Shouting erupts. Rifle fire cracks through the jungle. George scrambles out of the crater and runs. He dives behind a fallen tree as bullets chew the earth around him. He fires again. Another soldier drops. More voices. The Japanese are flanking. George runs north, sprinting blind through vines and branches. Bullets snap past him. 90 seconds later, he dives into another shell crater, dry this time. Silence. At 11:13, George reaches American lines. He reports to Captain Morris. 11 snipers killed. 12 rounds fired. 3 more infantry during the breakout. Morris listens without interrupting. Later that day, Colonel Ferry asks a single question. Can George teach others to do this? Turning one rifleman into a doctrine. Colonel Ferry does not look impressed. He looks interested. The question is simple, almost casual, but its implications are not. Can one lieutenant with a privately owned sporting rifle turn 14 expert marksmen into something the U.S. Army does not officially recognize? Snipers. George answers carefully. Yes, but only if the men can already shoot, and only if they have rifles with optics. Shooting like this cannot be taught from scratch in a jungle under fire. Ferry nods. Division has 14 Springfield rifles fitted with unertl scopes, left behind by the Marines. He also has 40 men in the regiment who qualified as expert marksmen before deployment. George is ordered to build something new. On January 27, 1943, training begins 2 miles east of Henderson Field. 40 men assemble in a clearing hacked out of the jungle. They are good shots on paper. None have hunted men from concealment. George keeps his Winchester. The Springfields go to the trainees. He starts with fundamentals. Breathing. Trigger squeeze. Reading wind through leaves instead of flags. He teaches them how to build firing positions out of mud, roots, and broken trees. The jungle does not offer comfort. Snipers must create stability from nothing. For 3 days, they shoot. Stationary targets. Moving targets. Shapes half hidden behind vegetation. By January 30th, 32 men can reliably hit man-sized targets at 300 yards under field conditions. George organizes them into 16 two-man teams. Shooter and spotter. The spotter carries binoculars and a Garand. After each engagement, they switch roles. No single point of failure. On February 1st, George takes 4 teams into the field west of the Matanacaw River. Intelligence reports Japanese infantry stragglers, not snipers, covering retreat routes. At 7:20, the first Japanese soldier appears on a trail below George's position. Corporal Hayes confirms through binoculars. George fires. The man drops. Over 6 hours, George's team kills 7 more soldiers. 7 shots. 6 hits. 1 missed due to wind. The other teams report similar results. 23 Japanese soldiers killed that day. 0 American casualties. The sniper section continues operations through early February. By February 9th, they have 74 confirmed kills. The Japanese evacuation accelerates. Destroyers arrive at night to extract troops from Cape Esperance. On February 7th, near the Tanambogo River, George is shot. The bullet hits his left shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Hayes drags him to cover. The wound is serious but survivable. George is evacuated. From a hospital bed near Henderson Field, he learns Guadalcanal is over. But his war is not. Orders arrive from Pacific Command. A new mission. Classified. Jungle warfare. Long-range patrols. George volunteers. In March 1943, he boards a transport headed west. His Winchester Model 70 is packed in oilcloth below deck. Destination, India. Burma, where the rifle became a tool, not a legend. April 3, 1943. India. The heat hits differently here. Thicker. Heavier. The air smells of dust, rot, and sweat instead of salt and jungle mud. George steps off the transport ship with 200 other officers, most of them lean, hard-eyed, already wondering why they've been pulled from familiar units and sent halfway across the world. The briefing is short and deliberately vague. They are forming a new unit. Long-range penetration. Jungle warfare. No supply lines. No fixed front. Operations behind Japanese lines for weeks at a time. Someone whispers a name before it's official. Merrill's Marauders. George listens more than he talks. Guadalcanal taught him that rifles and reputations mean nothing without endurance. Burma will not care how well a man can shoot if he cannot walk, climb, and survive. He modifies his Winchester before training begins. The Lyman Alaskan comes off. It's reliable, but too heavy. He replaces it with a Weaver 330, same 2.5 power magnification, 8 ounces lighter. He swaps the wooden stock for a lighter synthetic one. The rifle drops under 9 pounds. Not much on paper. Everything in practice. Training begins in central India. Long marches. Jungle survival. Navigation without maps. Sleeping wet. Eating cold. Learning to move silently through vegetation that tears skin and soaks clothing within minutes. The terrain in Burma will be worse. In February 1944, the Marauders enter Burma. They march where the Japanese believe large forces cannot go. Mountains, rivers, jungles so dense that visibility drops to 30 feet. Supplies are carried on backs and pack mules. Men collapse from exhaustion. Malaria spreads. Dysentery follows. George leads a rifle platoon, but his reputation precedes him. Command knows what he can do with a rifle. He uses the Winchester sparingly. Once at 412 yards, against a Japanese officer directing a river crossing. One shot. One body. Immediate relocation. Once at 380 yards, silencing a machine gun position that had pinned down a patrol. Once at 290 yards, killing a sniper who had learned enough to stay low and patient. 3 shots. 3 kills. No second shots. No lingering. The Winchester's report is distinctive. 1 shot is acceptable. 2 invite pursuit. By May, the Marauders are hollowed out. Disease kills more men than bullets. Of the 5,300 who entered Burma, fewer than 3,000 remain combat effective. On May 17th, they capture Myit Kina airfield. The mission succeeds. The unit does not. George survives. His rifle survives. But the rifle that dominated Guadalcanal is almost irrelevant here. Most fighting is at 50 yards or less. Ambushes. Sudden firefights. No clean lines of sight. George understands something important. The Winchester Model 70 is a superb rifle. But warfare is changing. In June 1944, George is evacuated with the rest of the Marauders. The unit is disbanded. He is reassigned to training duty in the United States. He will never fire his Winchester in combat again. What remains after the jungle? July 1944. United States. John George steps off the transport thinner than when he left, his shoulders still stiff, his eyes older. The Army promotes him to captain and assigns him to Fort Benning, Georgia. His job is no longer to hunt men in trees, but to teach others how not to die when the shooting starts. He teaches marksmanship the way he learned it, through discipline, patience, and an understanding that bullets are not wasted simply because they miss. He teaches small unit tactics shaped by jungle warfare, how terrain matters more than doctrine, how a soldier must think independently when cut off from support. The Winchester Model 70 stays with him. It sits in a footlocker in his quarters. He cleans it occasionally, oils the metal, runs patches through the barrel until they come out white. He does not talk about point crews. He does not talk about Burma. The war moves on without him. Normandy, the Bulge, Okinawa, Iwo Jima. The army standardizes. Mass production replaces individual solutions. Sniping becomes formalized, regulated, institutional. George understands why, but something has been lost. In January 1947, George leaves the army as a lieutenant colonel. 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, Combat Infantryman Badge. He returns to Illinois and enrolls at Princeton on the GI Bill. He studies politics, graduates with highest honors, goes on to Oxford, then Africa, then Washington. He becomes a scholar, a diplomat, a man whose past rarely surfaces. In 1947, he writes it down, not as a story, as a record. Weapons, ballistics, tactics, mistakes, observations. 400 pages of clinical detail. A friend at the NRA convinces him to publish it. The book is called Shots Fired in Anger. It becomes a quiet classic. Collectors read it. Historians reference it. Soldiers rediscover lessons the army once had to learn the hard way. John George lives long enough to see Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf War. He watches rifles evolve. Garand to M14 to M16. He watches sniping become a profession, with doctrine, schools, and budgets. He dies on January 3, 2009, 90 years old. The Winchester Model 70 is donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. It rests behind glass with a small placard. Most visitors walk past. It looks like any other hunting rifle. It is not. It is the rifle they laughed at. The rifle that ended 11 snipers in 4 days when a battalion could not. The rifle that proved individual skill still mattered in industrial war. The rifle that forced an army to relearn an old truth. That wars are not only won by machines. Sometimes, they are won by one man, one rifle, and the patience to wait for a branch to move.